Okay, so this is my graphics application for CMP502. Not sure if we're supposed to be talking over the video, but if not, I guess just mute. Um, a relatively simple scene, just mainly based around a height-displaced terrain mesh, based on a sort of fairly straightforward height map. With two directional lights with diffuse and ambient components casting correct shadows over the scene. So if I just sort of crank up some color values here, you can see the shadows being cast correctly from this direction and also from this direction, seeing these red and green shadows respectively. Decided just to sort of leave the frustra relatively visible so you can see the effects of the ambient components of the lights in these sort of fully enshadowed back corners over here. But yeah, these ImGui controls just control the RGB channels of the two light sources in the scene. Beyond that, there's a tessellation mesh in the scene. Unfortunately, doesn't cast or receive shadows correctly, but decided to leave it in anyway as it is demonstrating correct tessellation. It's being dynamically manipulated according to a sort of time value and a wave function, and is displaying color texture information correctly thanks to color interpolation in the domain shader. Otherwise, I would suppose the main other sort of component of the scene is a directional blur shader, which has blur strength component and then X and Y components of a blur direction vector. So if I increase the blur strength and then start moving around the blur direction in X, you can see this sort of image shifting to the left and right and blurring in that same direction, and the same with the Y component as well. So the whole scene sort of blurs up and to the right when X and Y are 1, and then we can move them down, it blurs them down to the left, and you can have the values anywhere in between. Blur strength just increases the overall factor of the blur. Blur strength does also, as it goes up, lead to an increase in value just because of how I've implemented the directional blur, where it's sampling over a number of texels and then combining their values together. And even though it's weighted, there is this sort of accumulation of value that takes place. Maybe with more sort of sophisticated functions, you could avoid or tampen down a lot of this value accumulation. I do have a control factor in there, it's just not 100% effective, but it gets the most part of the job done, I would say. But yeah, that's the most of it, I would say. Yeah, just height-displaced terrain mesh, casting shadows in two directional lights, the tessellated wave mesh, and then the directional blur.